Picture this. The most exclusive restaurant in the city, the Azure, where a single meal costs more than most people earn in a month. Crystal chandeliers casting golden light over marble floors. The quiet murmur of wealthy conversations, the gentle clink of expensive silverware against fine china. Everything perfect. Everything controlled. And then, in one breathtaking moment, everything shattered. The entire VIP section went deathly silent. A glass slipped from someone's hand and exploded against the floor, but nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Because something impossible had just happened. 3 children, triplets who had been completely mute since the day they were born 3 years ago, had just spoken their very first words. Their father, Richard Ashford, one of the most powerful billionaires in the country, stood frozen in absolute shock. His mouth hung open. His eyes were wide with disbelief. These were his children, Lily, Benjamin, and Grace. And he had spent 3 years, countless thousands of dollars on specialists, speech therapists, neurologists, trying desperately to hear them speak just once. And now, finally, they had spoken. But they weren't looking at him. They weren't looking at their expensive nannies in their crisp gray uniforms. All 3 of them, with their tiny fingers pointing and trembling, were looking at a woman on her knees on the floor, picking up broken glass with her bare hands. A waitress. A nobody. Someone in a stained uniform and shoes 2 sizes too big because she couldn't afford ones that fit. And their voices, crystal clear and heartbreaking, filled the silent room with one impossible word. Mama, let me take you back just a few minutes earlier so you can understand how we got to this moment that would change everything. Maya Torres wiped the sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand, careful not to get grease on her already dirty uniform. Her feet were screaming in pain inside those terrible cheap sneakers, but she couldn't think about that now. She was 3 months behind on rent. Her landlord had threatened to change the locks by Friday. She needed this job. She needed every single shift she could get. Table 4 needs water, Maya. Move it. Greg, her manager, a sweaty, impatient man who treated her like she was invisible, barked from across the kitchen. And don't mess this up. The Ashford family is here tonight. Maya's hands started shaking. The tray she was holding rattled. Ashford? She whispered, barely able to get the word out. Yes, Richard Ashford. The tech billionaire. He rented out the entire East Wing. Now go. Maya felt like someone had punched her in the chest. She hadn't heard that name in 3 years. Not since the clinic. Not since she signed those papers that ruined her life. Not since the day she woke up empty, with her babies gone and her mother dead. She took a deep breath, steadied her trembling hands, and walked toward the East Wing. The moment she crossed through those doors, everything changed. The air smelled different, expensive cologne, fresh flowers, and something else. Something heavy. Tension. Grief. Richard Ashford sat at the head of a long table that probably cost more than Maya would earn in her entire lifetime. He looked older than his pictures in the magazines. Gray streaks at his temples. Deep lines around his eyes. The permanent expression of someone carrying unbearable weight. His suit probably cost $10,000, maybe more. Around him were 3 high chairs. And in those chairs, the triplets. Maya felt it the moment she saw them. A physical ache in her chest. A pull so strong it nearly buckled her knees. Her body recognized them, even though her mind screamed at her to look away, to stay professional, to remember she had signed away any right to feel what she was feeling. The children were crying. Not screaming tantrums, but soft, desperate whimpering that cut straight through Maya's soul like a knife. 2 nannies were trying to force organic pureed peas into their mouths. But the children were turning their heads away, tears streaming down their little faces. They won't eat, Mr. Ashford, one nanny said nervously. Richard didn't even look up from his phone. Make them eat. That's what I pay you 6 figures for. His voice was cold. Empty. Detached. Maya approached the table, the pitcher of water shaking in her hands. She kept her head down. She had learned long ago that to rich people, she was just furniture. Just part of the scenery. Water for the table, sir? She asked quietly. Richard waved a dismissive hand. Just fill the glasses. And tell the chef my steak is taking too long. Maya moved around the table carefully, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. As she passed the high chairs, something strange happened. The whimpering stopped. Suddenly, completely, as if someone had flipped a switch. Little Benjamin, with his wild curly hair, turned his head sharply. He sniffed the air. Then Lily did the same. Grace, the smallest of the 3, dropped her spoon. It clattered against the high chair tray. Maya tried to move quickly, to pour the water and get out of there before something terrible happened. But as she leaned over Richard's crystal goblet, the scent of her soap, that cheap lavender bar she bought at the dollar store because it was all she could afford, drifted across the table. Everything happened in slow motion. Grace reached out her tiny hand and grabbed the fabric of Maya's apron. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Maya gasped. She froze. "Hey," the nanny snapped. "Let go of that dirty apron, Grace." The nanny tried to pry the child's fingers away, but Grace held on like her life depended on it. And then the silence broke. "Mom," Grace said. The word hung in the air like thunder. Maya stopped breathing. The pitcher slipped from her hands. Ice water and shattered glass exploded across the expensive table, soaking Richard's suit, flooding across the mahogany surface. The entire restaurant gasped. Greg, the manager, came running from the kitchen, panic written all over his face. But Richard didn't yell about the water. He didn't move. He was staring at his daughter, his face completely white, as if he'd seen a ghost. "What did you say?" he whispered, his voice trembling. Benjamin pointed his finger directly at Maya. "Mom," he stated firmly, clearly, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. Lily slammed her tiny hands on her high-chair tray, her eyes wide and filled with something that looked like recognition, like coming home after being lost. "Mommy! Up, up!" Richard stood up so fast his chair toppled backward and crashed to the floor. He stared at Maya with eyes that had turned from grief to dangerous suspicion in seconds. "Who are you?" he growled, his voice low and threatening. "And why are my children, who haven't spoken a single word since the day they were born, calling you mother?" Greg was already there, grabbing Maya's arm hard enough to bruise. "I am so sorry, Mr. Ashford. She's new, she's incompetent. You're fired, Maya. Get out. Get out now." "No." The single word from Richard was quiet, but it carried enough power to freeze everyone in place. Richard walked around the table, his expensive shoes crunching on broken glass. He ignored the water dripping from his suit jacket. He loomed over Maya, who was shaking so hard her teeth were chattering. "Leave us," Richard ordered the staff, his eyes never leaving Maya's face. "But sir," Greg stammered. "I said leave us," Richard roared. Greg and the other waiters scattered like frightened animals. The nanny stepped back, looking terrified. Richard grabbed Maya's chin, forcing her to look him in the eyes. His grip was firm, unyielding. "I'm going to ask you one time," he hissed. "Did my late wife hire you? Is this some sick joke Christine planned from the grave? Or are you a stalker?" I don't know what you mean," Maya stammered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm just a waitress. I've never met you." "Liar!" Richard shouted. At the sound of his anger, the triplets began to scream. Not the soft whimpering from before. This was full-blown, terrified shrieking. Benjamin was reaching his arms out toward Maya so desperately he looked like he might fall out of his high chair. "Mommy! Mommy!" "Scared!" Benjamin cried, his little voice breaking with terror. The sound tore through Maya like a bullet. Instinct took over. She forgot she was a broke waitress. She forgot he was a billionaire who could destroy her. She slapped Richard's hand away from her face. "Stop it," she yelled at him. "You're terrifying them." She turned to the high chairs. Ignoring the shocked nannies, she knelt down to eye level with the children. And then she began to hum. It was a specific melody, low and rhythmic. A lullaby she used to sing 3 years ago, alone in her tiny apartment, when she would rub her swollen belly and dream about the babies inside her. The effect was instantaneous. The screaming stopped. The triplets hiccuped, tears still wet on their cheeks, but they calmed down immediately. Their little bodies relaxed. They looked at her with pure, absolute adoration. Richard watched, his mouth slightly open in shock. "That song," he whispered, his face turning ashen. "Christine used to hum that. That was the only way she could get them to sleep when they were in the NICU. How do you know that song?" Maya stood up, her face pale. She realized she had made a terrible mistake. I heard it on the radio," she lied, and even she knew it sounded pathetic. "I have to go. Keep your job. Keep your money. I'm leaving." She turned and ran toward the kitchen exit. "Wait," Richard shouted. But as Maya moved away, chaos erupted. The children didn't just cry, they began to hyperventilate. Benjamin turned purple, holding his breath. Grace started banging her head against the back of her chair. "Sir, he's turning blue," one of the nannies screamed, pointing at Benjamin with shaking hands. Richard looked from his dying son to the fleeing waitress. He had no choice. "Security," he yelled into his lapel microphone. "Stop that woman." Do not let her leave this building. Two massive bodyguards in black suits appeared out of nowhere, blocking the kitchen door just as Maya reached it. She slammed into the chest of a man who felt like a brick wall. Please, Maya begged, looking back at Richard with desperate eyes. Let me go. You don't understand what you're doing. Richard marched over, grabbed her wrist in a grip like iron, and dragged her back toward the table. Back toward the children. As soon as she was close again, Benjamin took a gasping breath. His color returned. The crisis passed. You aren't going anywhere, Richard said, his voice shaking with rage and confusion. My children are physically attached to you somehow. You're going to tell me exactly who you are. And if you lie to me again, I'll have the police here in 5 minutes to charge you with attempted kidnapping. Maya looked at the triplets. They were reaching for her, their tiny fingers opening and closing, desperate for her touch. She looked at Richard and saw the pain behind his anger. If I tell you the truth, Maya whispered, defeat slumping her shoulders, it will destroy everything you think you know about your wife. Richard's eyes hardened like steel. Try me. What secret is Maya hiding? How could she possibly be connected to Richard's children? And what truth about his late wife Christine could be so devastating that it would destroy everything he believed? Stay with us to get to know, where the DNA results come back, and nothing will ever be the same again. Richard commandeered the restaurant manager's private office, slamming the door shut and locking it from the inside. Outside, you could hear the muffled sounds of staff gossiping, whispering about what they'd just witnessed. But inside that small room, the air was so thick with tension you could barely breathe. Maya stood pressed against the filing cabinets, hugging her arms around her chest like she was trying to hold herself together. In the dining room beyond, the triplets were screaming again, their cries vibrating through the walls. Each scream felt like a knife in her heart. Richard paced like a caged animal. When he finally spoke, his voice was dangerously low. Make it make sense, he said. My wife Christine carried those children for 9 months. I felt them kick through her stomach. I saw the ultrasound pictures. I was there at the hospital when the doctor handed them to me. So tell me, Waitress, how do you fit into this? Maya looked at the floor. Her voice was barely a whisper. Did you ever see her bare stomach after the 4th month? Richard stopped pacing. She was modest, sensitive about the stretch marks. She wore loose tunics and he trailed off as a cold realization crept up his spine. She wore a prosthetic, Maya said quietly. Made of silicone. High grade. Cost $5,000. That's insane, Richard snapped. Why would she do that? Because she didn't want to ruin her body, Maya said, her voice gaining strength. And because she didn't want you to know she couldn't conceive. She wanted the perfect image. The perfect Ashford legacy. Richard felt the room spinning. So you're telling me you were a surrogate? Not just a surrogate. I was what the agency called a ghost carrier. Maya closed her eyes, remembering the cold, sterile lights of the clinic. 3 years ago, my mother was dying of kidney failure. I needed money for her surgery. I was 22, desperate and healthy. A woman approached me. She worked for a private agency called Silent Cradle. They offered me $200,000. Silent Cradle? Richard stopped pacing. I've never heard of them. You wouldn't. They serve people like your wife. People who want children but don't want the inconvenience of pregnancy. Maya's voice cracked. They implanted 3 embryos. They told me it was rare for all 3 to survive. Usually 1 or 2 don't make it. But your children, they were fighters. All 3 of them held on. Her eyes filled with tears. I carried them. I felt them hiccup inside me. I sang to them every single night because I was alone in a safe house the agency rented for me. I wasn't allowed to leave. I wasn't allowed to have a phone. My only company was the babies growing inside me. And the birth? Richard asked, his face unreadable. Maya's voice dropped to a whisper. They induced me 2 weeks early at a private facility in the hills. They sedated me heavily. When I woke up, my stomach was flat and the room was empty. They told me the babies were healthy and that my job was done. They gave me a check and a bus ticket home. She looked up at Richard, her eyes burning with grief and anger. When I got home, my mother had already passed away. While I was locked up carrying your children, she died alone. I sold my body to save her, and I failed. I never even got to hold the babies. I never saw their faces until today. But I knew that hum would calm them, because it was the only thing I had to give them while they were inside me. Richard leaned against the desk. He looked devastated, like his entire world had just collapsed. His marriage, the last few years of his life, All of it felt like a lie built on smoke and mirrors. But he was a businessman. He dealt in facts, not stories. It's a compelling story, Richard said, straightening his tie. But that's all it is, a story. You could have researched Silent Cradle. You could be a con artist. Then let me go, Maya challenged him, meeting his eyes. If I'm a liar, let me leave. Why keep me here? Because, Richard said, gesturing toward the door where the screams were getting louder, my children seem to believe you. And until I know why, you belong to me. He pulled out his phone and dialed. Prepare the car. And call Dr. Pierce. Tell him to meet me at the estate immediately with paternity and maternity testing kits. He hung up and looked at Maya with eyes that promised a storm. You're coming home with me. If the DNA proves you're lying, you go to prison for fraud. If you're telling the truth. He didn't finish the sentence. The look in his eyes terrified Maya more than any threat of prison ever could. The drive to the Ashford estate was excruciating. Richard sat in front with his driver. Maya sat in back, squeezed between two car seats. The moment she'd stepped out of that office, Benjamin had reached for her. Richard had ordered the nannies to step aside, and when Maya picked up the little boy, he buried his face in her neck, inhaling deeply, his sobs reducing to contented sighs. Now in the car, Lily held Maya's hand. Grace had fallen asleep clutching the hem of Maya's stained uniform. As the city gave way to rolling hills and iron gates, Maya's terror grew. She lived in a studio apartment with a leaky roof. She didn't belong in this world of mansions and billions. When the car stopped in front of a house that looked more like a palace, the front doors flew open. A woman marched out, tall, striking, with jet-black hair pulled into a severe bun and red lipstick that looked like a wound. She wore a white designer dress that cost more than Maya's entire existence. That's Natasha, Richard muttered. Christine's sister. Maya's stomach dropped. She knew about Natasha from the tabloids. She'd moved into the estate after Christine died 6 months ago, supposedly to help with the children. But the rumors suggested she was trying to replace her sister in Richard's bed. Dominic, Natasha called out, her voice shrill. Why are you back so early? And who is this? She looked at Maya with pure, unadulterated disgust. There was an incident, Richard said shortly. Is Dr. Pierce here? He's in the library. But Richard, why is the help holding Benjamin? No, Benjamin screamed, wrapping his arms tighter around Maya's neck. Mommy, Natasha froze. Her face went pale, then red with rage. What did he say? He called her mom, Richard said, watching Natasha's reaction carefully. All three of them did. Natasha laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. That's ridiculous. These children are delayed. They have cognitive issues. They probably think the gardener is their father too. She glared at Maya. Hand him over. You're dirtying his clothes. Natasha reached out and grabbed Benjamin's arm aggressively. Don't touch him. Maya snapped, twisting to shield the child. You're hurting him. How dare you speak to me? Natasha raised her hand to slap Maya. Richard caught her wrist midair. That's enough, Natasha. He dropped her hand. Maya is my guest. She stays until I say otherwise. Guest? Natasha screeched. She's a waitress. Look at her shoes. Richard, this is embarrassing. I don't care. Inside. Everyone. In the grand library, Dr. Pierce, a balding man with wire-rimmed glasses, was waiting with his medical case. I need a rush job, Pierce, Richard said. I want to know if this woman is biologically related to my children. Natasha stood by the fireplace, arms crossed. This is a waste of money. She's clearly a con artist. Maya ignored her. She was busy checking Benjamin's diaper, which the nannies had neglected for hours. Do you have wipes? Maya asked Richard. Richard blinked, thrown off. I'll have the staff. No need, Maya said, pulling spare napkins from her apron pocket. She gently cleaned Benjamin's face. There you go, little bear. Little bear? Natasha scoffed. Christine never called them that. No, Richard said softly, his eyes narrowing. But I found a diary in Christine's things. She wrote that the incubator kept calling baby a little bear in the letters the agency forwarded. Christine thought it was tacky. The room went silent. I wrote letters, Maya said, looking up. Every week. I asked them to give them to the parents. I hoped you were reading them to the babies. Christine burned them, Richard said, his voice hollow. She told me they were bills. Dr. Pierce took swabs from Maya and the children. As he packed up, Natasha stepped forward. I want a sample from me too. Why? Richard asked. Natasha smiled like a snake. To prove that blood is thicker than water. and that this nobody is nothing. For agonizing hours later, Dr. Pierce returned. The library felt like a tomb. Rain hammered against the windows. Lightning flashed, illuminating Natasha's tense face. Maya sat on the velvet sofa with all three triplets clinging to her. Richard stood by the window. Natasha gripped the fireplace mantle. "Read it, Pierce," Richard said. Dr. Pierce cleared his throat uncomfortably. "I ran the samples 3 times, Richard. The results are unexpected." "Is she the mother?" Richard demanded. "There is no doubt," Pierce said. "Maya is the biological mother of Lily, Benjamin, and Grace. A 99.99% match." Maya let out a breath she'd been holding for 3 years. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She wasn't crazy. They were hers. "However," Dr. Pierce continued, "that's not the surprising part." Richard turned. "What is it?" "I compared the children's DNA to Christine's file. The children share 50% DNA with you, Richard, and 50% with Maya. They are not traditional surrogacy babies. Maya isn't just the carrier, she's the egg donor. These are her children biologically. Completely." The silence was deafening. Maya's eyes widened. "But they told me the embryos were already formed." "Silent Cradle lied," Pierce said grimly. "And so did Christine." Richard grabbed the papers, staring at the numbers. "She lied. Christine knew she was infertile. She didn't want to use a donor egg because I wanted our bloodline. So she bought you." He looked at Maya. "She bought your eggs and your womb and pretended they were hers." Natasha laughed sharply from the corner. "Oh, poor Richard. Always the last to know." "You knew?" Richard spun on her. "Of course I knew." Natasha sneered. "Christine was barren since her 20s. But she needed to secure her marriage to you. The prenup said no children, no billions. Remember? So you orchestrated this. Found a desperate woman, used her, and planned to discard her. It was a business transaction." Natasha shouted. "And it worked, until SHE showed up and ruined it." "They are MY children," Maya said, standing. Her voice was stronger now. "My flesh and blood. You stole them from me." Natasha reached into her purse and pulled out a folded document. "It doesn't matter. Because of this." She slammed it on the desk. "What is that?" Richard asked. "The original contract Maya signed. Clause 14, Section B. The surrogate donor waives all parental rights regardless of genetic contribution. Any attempt to contact the children results in a $5 million penalty and imprisonment for breach of contract." Natasha looked at Maya with dead eyes. "You signed it, honey. You sold them. You have no rights. And if you don't leave right now, I will sue you and throw you in prison for the rest of your life." Maya stared at the paper, remembering that desperate day. The pressure. The need to save her mother. "Is it legal?" Richard asked Pierce. "Predatory but binding," Pierce said grimly. Natasha crossed her arms triumphantly. "So here's the deal. Maya leaves tonight and never comes back, or I call the lawyers and she goes to prison while the children watch." Richard looked at Maya. She was trembling, defeated. Then the library door creaked open. 3 small figures in pajamas stood there. They'd escaped the nannies. They ignored Richard. They ignored Natasha. They walked straight to Maya and wrapped themselves around her. "Home," Benjamin said softly. "Mom is home." Richard looked at his children. He looked at the woman who gave them life. He looked at the contract. Then he picked it up and slowly, deliberately ripped it in half. "Richard!" Natasha shrieked. "What are you doing?" "I'm the billionaire here, Natasha," Richard said, his voice ice cold. "I have more lawyers than you have brain cells. I will burn Silent Cradle to the ground. I will bankrupt you if you try to enforce that paper." He walked to Maya and placed a hand on her shoulder. "She isn't going anywhere. But you are." Natasha's face twisted with venom. "You think you've won? You forgot one thing. The night Christine died? She wasn't alone in the car. I have the dashcam footage, Richard. The one I hid from police." Richard froze. "What are you talking about?" "If you kick me out," Natasha smiled, pulling a USB drive from her pocket, "I release the video. And everyone will know your empire is built on blood." The library felt like a tomb. Lightning flashed. Natasha held the USB like a weapon. "You have a choice, Richard. Let this waitress go, or I destroy you." Richard was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Do it." Natasha blinked. "Excuse me?" "Play it," Richard repeated calmly. He walked to the desk, opened the laptop, and turned it toward the room. "If I'm a monster, let Maya see. I have nothing to hide. Do you?" Natasha's smile faltered, but she recovered. "Fine. You asked for this. She plugged in the drive and hit play. The dashcam footage appeared. Rain. Highway lights. The timestamp. 6 months ago, 11:42 p.m. Christine's voice filled the room, hysterical with guilt. I can't do this anymore, Bella. I see their faces in my sleep. I see that poor girl's face. We stole her babies. Maya covered her mouth, sobbing. Natasha's voice on the recording was vicious and cold. Pull yourself together, you pathetic cow. We didn't steal anything. It was fraud. Christine screamed. I'm telling Richard tonight. I'm turning the car around. You will do no such thing. Natasha shrieked. On screen, Natasha unbuckled and lunged across the console. Her hands, recognizable by her diamond bracelet, grabbed the steering wheel. Let go! Christine screamed. You're going to kill us. If you turn this car around, I lose everything. Natasha roared. I won't let you ruin me. Natasha shoved Christine's face against the window and yanked the wheel hard right. The car swerved. Tires screamed. Metal crunched. Glass shattered. Then silence. The video ended. In the library, Natasha was trembling, staring at the screen in horror. She'd remembered the argument, but she'd convinced herself it was an accident. She hadn't realized the camera caught everything. Richard straightened slowly. That wasn't an accident. That was murder. You killed your own sister to keep your money. No, it looks worse than it was. She was hysterical. You said, I won't let you ruin me, Maya spoke up, her voice shaking but strong. You grabbed the wheel to stop her from telling the truth. Shut up, Natasha screamed, lunging for the laptop. That's enough, Richard barked. The library doors burst open. 4 uniformed police officers entered, led by the chief of police. We saw the whole thing, Miss Natasha, the chief said. Mr. Ashford had us connected to the security feed. We heard the blackmail. We saw the video. Natasha looked from the police to Richard. You set me up. I gave you a shovel, Richard said coldly. You dug the grave yourself. Officers grabbed her arms. She thrashed, screaming. I'm a Ashford by marriage. I have rights. You stopped being family when you betrayed my wife and children, Richard said, turning his back. Maya, Natasha screamed as they dragged her out. This is your fault. I hope you are OT. The door slammed. The screaming faded. Silence. Maya's legs gave out. She collapsed onto the ottoman. The triplets pressed against her, offering wordless comfort. Richard knelt beside her. I'm sorry. I had to let her play her hand. It was the only way. Maya looked up, wiping tears. The contract, can she really? Richard pulled out his phone and dialed his attorney. Harrison, I want you to annul the NDA and surrogacy contract signed by Maya Torres. Cite fraud and coercion. And draft adoption papers, or rather, reinstatement of parental rights. I want Maya's name on every birth certificate and legal document regarding my children by Monday morning. Consider it done, sir. Richard hung up. He looked at Maya. Nobody is taking them. Not the law, not Natasha, not anyone. You are their mother. The only mother they've ever known. Maya looked at the triplets. Benjamin touched her cheek. Mom, cry. Maya smiled through her tears. No, baby. Mom is happy. Mom is finally home. 6 months later. Morning sun filtered through sheer curtains in the renovated West Wing. Maya sat at the vanity, not in a waitress uniform, but in a silk blouse and tailored trousers. The shadows under her eyes were gone, replaced by a glow of health and peace. Ready. Richard appeared with 2 coffees. Nervous, Maya admitted. First board meeting. You'll be fine, Richard said, wrapping his arms around her. You're the head of the foundation. You know what struggling families need better than anyone. Down the hall, giggling erupted. Ready or not, here we come. The door flew open. The triplets charged in, taller now, rosy-cheeked, their silence a distant memory. Look, Mom. Grace held up a drawing. I drew the garden. Maya picked her up. It's beautiful, sweetheart. Richard looked at the crude stick figure drawing. A family holding hands. A giant yellow sun beaming down. We have to go, Richard said, checking his watch. But he didn't move. He leaned in and kissed Maya, a soft, lingering kiss that promised a lifetime of mornings like this. They walked down the grand staircase together. Not as Billionaire and Charity Case, but as partners. As parents. Natasha was in prison awaiting trial. The silent cradle scandal had rocked the nation, leading to new laws protecting vulnerable women. But here, inside the gates of the Ashford estate, none of that mattered. All that mattered was 3 happy children running toward the door, shouting the word that started it all. Mom, Dad, come on. And that's the incredible journey of Maya and the Ashford family. It's terrifying how close evil came to winning, simply because it had money and power. But in the end, truth and a mother's love proved stronger than any contract or threat. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories like this. I'll see you in the next one.